For us to come back into regular session, if somebody would so move.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Is there a second?
David.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Announcements. ZARC will be having a meeting on October 13th at 9:30 a.m. in Room A, and this is on the Landwin rezoning request. So those of you who are on ZARC. 1:30? Okay. Is that correct, Mr. Quinn? It's 1:30.
Yes, Madam
Okay.
President.
That will be 1:30 p.m. in Room A, and that's the Landwin rezoning request. You should have gotten in your packet of materials the minutes from the regular meeting of September 15th, 2016. Were there any additions, corrections? Anyone? All right, hearing...
I move approval of the minutes
Okay,
of the
it's
September 15th.
been moved by Ms. Ullman. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Krummiller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
There is one little thing, and that has Jenny Crummiller here present twice, which is probably under the first line, present?
I was only present once.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
Pretty emphatic, yes. Would you, I think we can get that correction made. Good. All right, the next items, findings of fact, resolutions. We had a request for a professional service agreement. This is Miller, Porter, and Muller. This is the Hidayah subdivision. This is a revote. Let's see. I believe Mr. Cohen abstained from the original application, so... Okay, he was disqualified, so I need someone else to move this.
I move approval, Tim Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Ms. Lempert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Then we had the findings of fact for the Avalon Princeton LLC amended site plan. Anyone, any questions on that? Emendations? Would somebody like to move that one?
I'll move the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
I'll second, yeah.
It was seconded by Ms. Ullman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Then we have a request for professional service agreement. This is Miller, Porter, and Muller. It's for Wei Chi Chen and Ichen Mei subdivision. This is 47 Marion Road East. Any questions? Would someone like to move that?
I'll move approval, Gail.
Moved by Ms. Ullman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Mayor Lempert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, that brings us to the hearing for this evening. This is RB Homes Incorporated. This has been carried from meeting to meeting, the last one being the September 15th agenda. It's a major site plan with variances for 2003, 2005 Nassau Street, Block 47.02, Lot 19. And the deadline for action was in May. It's been extended to October 7th of this year. But, Mr. Solo, would you like to start us off on this?
Yes, Mr. Solo, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this matter?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. As the chair indicated, this is a major site plan application. I'll be going through a brief summary of the application tonight. I should point out, the original application did have variances. Since the original submission, all of those variances have been eliminated, so there are no variances. The property itself contains 3,603 square feet. It has an existing building on it that contains 5,316 square feet. I'm going to be using the lighting plan. I'll label it PB1. This is sheet 8 in your plan, and it shows a depiction of the property. In red is the property boundary line, and in the light gray is the existing building. And then, as you can see, Nassau Street is to the north at the top. To the left and to the, west is Charlton Street. The existing building contains retail and offices on the first floor and residential uses on the second and third floor. There are a total of 6 apartments in the existing building. Surrounding uses include a number of mixed-use buildings and St. Paul's Church, located over here, both up to the north. There are offices and retails to the east and the west of the property. That's to the left and the right as you're looking at the drawing. And then there are residential properties further down on Charlton Street, and off the map a little further to the south would be Princeton University's campus as well. The existing building is listed in the Princeton Master Plan as part of a suggested historic district to be known as the Anderson Town District, primarily along Nassau Street. 203, 205 Nassau is specifically listed in our master plan as a representative site for the proposed district. The property is listed as the Isaac Anderson House, circa 1760. The master plan also notes that the property is much altered, but is a rare survival from the 18th century. The site plan that we're going to talk about in a moment calls for the building to be demolished and a new 3-story building constructed using the existing footprint with the same floor area ratio. The new building will house retail and offices on the first floor. It will have 2 two-bedroom apartments on the second floor and 1 2-bedroom apartment on the third floor. In addition to the 3-story, 5,036 square foot building, the site also includes a number of additional improvements. There will be 5 air conditioning units located outside in a fenced area here. There will also be a dumpster area that is also enclosed as well. And then there's some additional landscaping as well as fencing along the east and south property line as well. And again, the proposed building has the exact same footprint as the existing, and there's a reason for that. Under the former borough ordinance, section 17A403, it permits any legally existing structure to be reconstructed to the same FAR, floor area ratio, and when reconstruction occurs, only that amount of off-street parking originally provided shall be required. The original site did not provide any parking, so none is being proposed and is in compliance with that. And again, the FAR is a match in terms of the proposal. As I indicated in the opening comments, there are now no variances associated with this application. As part of the construction of the new building, 3 trees will be removed, and the applicant is proposing to plant 3 new trees as well as a number of shrubs to improve the landscaping of the existing building. As I indicated, a fence will be on the east and south side. That will be a 6-foot-high wood fence. There's an existing fence that's in fairly good shape along the eastern property line, and that will remain. The development results in approximately 283 square feet of new impervious surface. That's below the threshold for any kind of stormwater management. You'll see in the municipal engineer's report, he requests that all downspouts be tied into the municipal storm sewer. We received comments from some of the advisory boards, and I'll briefly summarize those. I don't see anybody from SPRAB, so let me cover those. They suggest that the retail use should not be a food establishment, that the applicant should provide a material board for all facade materials, and that given the historic place the structure has in the fabric of Nassau Street, they recommend use of natural or painted brick facade where the existing building had brick. Excuse me. They suggest that the municipal arborist should review the trees to be removed to see if they could be retained, that screening for the AC unit should be reviewed by the board's landscape subcommittee, that the applicant consider balconies for the residential units, that a bike rack be provided containing 6 spaces for bike parking, and that they increase the size of the trash enclosure to accommodate, organic waste. The Environmental Commission had a number of suggestions as well. They're outlined in their report in more detail. I'm just going to go over those briefly. They asked that the applicant consider a green roof or providing solar on the roof, that the applicant should store the topsoil off-site to protect the existing trees, that the applicant provided protected bike parking, that adequate space be provided for all waste management, that an electric vehicle charging station be provided, that showers and lockers be provided for employees who might commute by bike, that the applicant use energy-efficient appliances, and that he submitted an indoor air quality plan. They've suggested the applicant reaches 50% of construction waste being recycled. They suggest that the applicant use FSC lumber, and that green building materials be used for the finishes and any building materials, and that the applicant avoid any of the red list materials that are listed in the PEC report. Our Traffic Safety Committee reviewed an earlier version of this plan where there was some parking provided, and their comments focused on concerns with cars backing out. That no longer applies with this current application. The board received 2 reports from the Historic Preservation Commission. The first was dated May 3rd of this year and indicates that they strongly object to the demolition, and they provided a summary of the historic significance of the building. The second report, dated August 2nd, recommends that the board hire a structural engineer. We have done that. John Harrison from Harrison Hammett is hiding out in the back, I think. And he can, you should have all received his report. And I thought, Madam Chair, if it's all right, after we go through the staff reports and the committee reports, we might want to bring John up and have him summarize his report as well. With me tonight is Derek Bridger, our zoning officer, and sitting in for Jack West, who's still recovering from knee surgery, is Alina Ferrara, our assistant municipal engineer. I don't know if you have questions. Well, first, did I miss anything, Derek or Alina, that you wanted to add?
No, you do your job, thanks.
Thank you.
Let me swear both of you in to the extent that you join in the conversation. Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this application?
Sir, I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
That's an overview of the application. I guess before we turn it over to the applicant, I don't know if the board has questions for myself or the staff.
Yes, Mr. Carr?
I just had one question. The report suggests that there's no intensification of the need for parking with the new plan. It seems to me the distinction between multi-bedroom apartments versus single-room occupancy rooms is a really different kind of user, and that the new dwelling units are more likely to require car parking. And I'm curious whether the determination that there was no intensification of the need for parking was based on anything other than, well, anything in particular.
I think it was primarily based on 2 factors. One, that it's 3 total units and there were 6. And the second is that based on the 17A403, there is no requirement for parking. It specifically says that in the ordinance, that if there wasn't any, you don't need to provide it. If you had one, you need to provide one.
Okay, but
I understand your comment, and I think you're right with the 2-bedroom. They might be more affluent, and you might have more need for a car, but the ordinance doesn't speak to that.
Any other questions for Mr. Solo? Okay.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to the applicant.
Well, no, we wanted to hear from,
I didn't know if HPC wanted to comment. I know some of them are here.
let's see, I don't see anybody from any of the other committees that did reports. Did anybody from HPC want to?
Yeah, I mean, Elric Endersby is here, and he was probably the most involved in this whole discussion. So we also have some questions from Tom White, and he's here for Mr. Hamnet. So
Could we maybe hear from Mr. Endersby, and then I guess I do want to hear Mr. Harrison comment briefly on his report, and perhaps Mr. White can ask the committee's questions at that point.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Endersby, if you'd be sworn in and tell us briefly what you want to say about this building.
Yes, sir. Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully? Thank you.
I wasn't expecting to speak tonight. I've had a lot to say about this project. I'm going to try if I wasn't expecting to speak this evening.
Still can't hear you. Is it?
I don't think so. Okay, I'll just tone it up, because I'm not, this isn't working.
To speak directly.
Okay. I was personally aghast when I heard that this building was in jeopardy. It has been part of the streetscape of Princeton for at least 250 years. Built variously, I would guess, between 1760 and later about 1780. Its significance was maybe best known for the fact that it was offered among other buildings in Princeton when Continental Congress was debating where to escape from Philadelphia in 1783. But it has other significance, partially in actually the history of the black community in Princeton. It also is it's a structure which embodies characteristics of the 18th century, which we know better from places like Bainbridge House and Beatty House and McLean House. It's been hidden from view for all these years and has been, I would say, misappreciated in recent years to its greater detriment. It has a wonderful original staircase. It has part of the original doorway. Other features which I remember from 40 years ago may still be there, but I haven't been privy to enter the building. I did have an opportunity in May to measure the exterior to find evidence of the original configuration of the structure to the east, which was a 3-bay structure and may have had something to do with Isaac Anderson's carriage-making operation. The initial report, which was commissioned by the Barsky firm, was extremely negative about the materials and the state of deterioration which existed, which they found. Our concern was that firm, that engineering firm, had less of experience with historic structures, and that's why we asked that we have the opportunity to find an alternative opinion, and it was you, I believe, who asked that be under your aegis, not that of the HPC. I have had a great deal of experience with John Harrison and his firm over a long period of time. I have great esteem for them and their willingness to deal with historic structures and historic materials. I felt like I'd lost a member of the family last week when I read John's report, because he confirmed many of the the conditions which had been outlined by the previous report. And I feel like I've given up my struggle to try to save this building. I think that it is important that we make every effort to learn from this experience. And I will say that we have had a very instructive, potentially positive experience on our part in dealing with the potential opportunities of this building. The Barsky firm and their attorney have, I think, made a sincere effort to listen to our point of view and to recognize, as we have, that preservation, I've heard that there's concern, particularly since we were talking about the possibility of trading the opportunity of retaining the original structure and combining it with greater use of the site, and we were told by the planning officers here that was going to set a dangerous precedent. I also feel, though, that this dialogue that we have entertained for the last 6 months also has the opportunity to set a precedent for preservation, and that it is in everybody's best interest in an historic community like this one, that when a structure which has been part of the community and prominent within the community for as long as this one is put into jeopardy, that we work creatively together to try to find solutions which benefit the community itself and preserve the fabric which has been part of our town for its long and established history. I think any other community I can think of that had a building that might have had members of the Continental Congress treading up the stairs would do everything in their power to preserve the building. And if we look back on it, we as a community probably should have been trying to make certain that this building was maintained over a long period of time. My hope is that we will find this as an opportunity to look at other structures, to look at other possibilities for engaging the preservation community in development within this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
The board have any questions for Mr. Endersby? Anyone? Mr. Endersby, let me ask you one question. This is here because there's a section in the master plan about a possible Andersontown Historic District. And if this building is removed, do you see any future for leaving that section in the master plan?
It still hurts. There are other buildings along that stretch from Washington Road stretching down toward Jugtown. Many of them no longer retain their original appearance, but there are still features in many which make them significant. I think the scale of the buildings is important, and I also think the personal history of some of the interpersonal relations which existed in town have to be preserved. As far as designating a district without its core structure, this will be a hard sell.
Thank you. Let's hear from John Harrison, if you could. And Mr. White, you wanted to ask some questions then, right? Okay.
Mr. Harrison, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this matter?
I do.
Thank you.
How would you like me to begin?
Maybe you could summarize your findings. The one thing I understand is that there was no sort of invasive investigation. You simply took what you could see. Is that correct?
Right, that is true. You know, it's painful to be here from my upbringing, and Elric didn't make it any easier for me, because I consider myself a preservation structural engineer. And there's several people in this room that I work for, and we've saved a lot of buildings. And that's where I come from, is to save buildings. And I said in my report, and I'll preface this again, any building can be saved. And we save an awful lot, some that are, that are being condemned. We worked a lot of properties in Trenton and even in Princeton. And one of my couple of my favorite projects are right down the street. If you remember, I don't know how many people are around when Fred Travisano, the late architect that saved the Thomas Sweet building, and we were able to keep the front wall and put a steel structure behind it. And we tore down the building behind and we built the building back. And very clever of him as an architect. I thought we were creative in doing that to save so we could have the side, but the back of the building was not was not functional. It was in bad shape, and the elements are there. So with this building, what I did, I approached it from, I'm going to save this building. Let's see what we've got, and let's save it. And like I say again, anything can be saved. But I started looking at the structural elements, and I had problems with the foundations, that the stones were starting to fall, the mortar was deteriorating, and there were some parts where the wall had actually failed. I looked at the first floor framing. I'm just looking at the structural components of the building. And the framing, there's a lot of what I call temporary structures that have been put up over the years. You'll probably see it in a lot of old houses. The floor bounced too much, and they put in things. A lot of things were put in because members had deteriorated, and they needed support. And some other things were a little bit, makeshift, but it's something I see a lot. But I looked at the floor framing and saying, well, we're going to put offices and the retail space in there, and it's not in good condition, so the whole floor most likely is going to have to be reframed and to bring it up to code to support those kind of loads. Offices is around 50 pounds a square foot, and the retail is around 75 pounds per square foot. So we walked up, and I went up to the second floor, and I will preface that there is a lot of finishes on most of the structure, so I can't see what is going on, and we didn't remove finishes. That wasn't in the scope of work. But the floor framing, there has some signs of rot, some deterioration in the plywood or the floor sheathing, and the stairs were going to the back, had some weak points in that. The same thing when we went to the third floor, which is the attic. There was a lot of sagging. There was some deflection. It was very bouncy. And the conditions of the floorboards were deteriorated from some water infiltration that's gotten through the windows. Some of the windows were missing. Excuse me just a minute. The roof framing was a concern because we weren't able to see. A lot of finishes were up underside of the rafters, but down around the perimeter we were able to see that there was some deterioration from some of the water getting in the gutter. So a lot of the roof rafters had some rot at the bottom. There was one portion of the roof that had been reframed. I said in my report it was structurally indeterminate. It's still there. It's kind of amazing that it's still there, but it was there, and you could reframe it. But it would take it would be a cistern effect or reinforcing of the roof. So I was concerned with the roof framing able to continue to support the code loads of snow. So, and then as I've done in several buildings, I looked at the outside of the building. I said, okay, we could put new floors in the building. We can put new floors in the second floor. We can frame it. Let's try to keep the brick walls. and keep the aesthetic of the building. But the condition of the brick walls, I found there was bowing, there were some connections to the floor that looked like had been put in, that there was movement in the walls. There was cracking over some of the lintels, there was cracking in some of the things. And I'm not an expert on brick restoration, but I started taking off all the paint because the brick has been painted. And when I took off the paint, the face of the brick came with it. And then you're back to the deterioration. And I think, like I said, and that would be a little bit out of my expertise, but I see it in some of the projects, is a problem is could you repaint this building? Probably not. Would you need stucco? That I don't know. But the brick is not in that good of shape. And I'm concerned that if you took the floors out, it might be an unsafe condition because that's what bracing the walls in the first place. So my conclusions were were based on, I just couldn't find anything that was structurally of the elements that were worth saving, and that's how I came to my conclusion.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. White, did you want to ask your questions? Tom, you have to speak into a microphone.
Tom White, I'm on HBC.
Yes, Tom, we also need to be sworn.
Yes, Mr. White, to the extent you're providing testimony, do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I think basically what my questions amount to was you had talked about being able to essentially rebuild a structure inside the Thomas Sweet building and save the front of that. And really, I'm wondering if the same thing could be done here, if there's a chance that the brick exterior or part of it could be saved by temporarily bracing it and then building the new structure inside and then tying the brick into it. And part of my question was how thick are the walls, because we don't really have an idea of that. We haven't been able to get into the building. And do you think there is a possibility that the brick exterior could be saved? Maybe the outer layer has to be relaid. And is that possible, I guess? I know, just about anything's possible if you spend enough money on it. But would it be a reasonable thing to think could be done?
The answer to that is yes. The brick walls could be saved in this building. And what it would take, and very similar to what we did for the Thomas Sweet's Wynitz Hall, if you're familiar with that, at Rutgers University, we dropped steel columns in the floor framing that was part of the new structure. Off that steel, we braced the walls, and then when we took out the floors, the walls were braced by a steel structure, and we were able to tie the walls into that steel structure and complete it once the floor was out. The things you have to be careful about is the building is right on the sidewalk. The walls are mostly 3 wide thick, Tom. The inside face would take the load from a structural standpoint. You're going to have to rebuild some of the foundations down there, but you could put a floor inside the building and brace the walls and save it. Now, the part I don't know about, where I have a condition, is I don't know about the exterior face of that brick. I'm not worried about that structurally. That's why I kind of said it's a little bit out of my expertise. But the inside things could still remain bearing for the house. And actually, the more load that you put on the brick walls, they work better structurally because you put them in compression. So once the floors are back on, it could be a stable structure.
Yes, let me ask a question. The documentation for this building says that in 1873 there was a major fire in the structure. The entire roof burned off, and everything in the building was lost because of water damage from the fire department working so hard on the roof. And obviously if this damage is visible, it would only be visible after you did destructive removal of the finishes inside. But how much would this jeopardize the integrity of a building?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of a fire.
And the fire department reports in the newspapers do report this as being a major fire.
Okay.
So, no, but apparently all of the roof structure was gone, and there was considerable damage. I just wanted to know whether factors like this would come to light as you went to work on the building.
Well, we could see about 10% of the roof framing because of all the finishes that were up there. We had to look into the knee walls in there, and I could see that it was old timbers that was it. It was kind of the old type of framing. So there's no evidence of a fire. They might have, when they reframed the one area that I said is kind of indeterminate, a lot of times that was probably redone at the time. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating that. But no, not really. The roof has been there for a long time, and it supported the snow load, so I don't think that that the fire would have been a major concern.
Okay, anybody else? Any questions? Julie? Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate what Elric said about, all of us working together and kind of brainstorming. I think that the applicant wanted to look at the possibilities. We were open to other possibilities, and it's Mr. Harrison's report is really elucidating and helpful in getting us to a conclusion.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. And I think now we're ready to hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Mrs. Gunning. Chris Tarr representing the applicant. With me is Daniel Barsky. If we could both be sworn, we have others here, but we're going to try to present just the two of us.
Okay, Mr. Tarr and Mr. Barsky, to the extent you provide testimony, do you swear or affirm you'll be testifying truthfully?
I do.
Thank you.
As he often does, Mr. Barsky is going to proceed with a series of PowerPoint slides. They're waiting. There they are. There are 47 in number. If we could mark them A1, and we have hard copy, we can leave, and we usually leave an electronic copy. So with that...
Is there an extra hard copy that I can work from?
No. Not tonight, I apologize.
I have a USB drive with it.
We have it on the drive.
Okay. So you'll identify, or they are identified by number, each of the 47 slides?
We'll make an effort to call them out to you.
And the whole thing will be marked as A1?
Thank you.
So should I say slide 1, slide 2? Good evening, board members. My name is Daniel Barsky, and I'm presenting on behalf of RB Homes. We already heard a lot of testimony, and my PowerPoint is going to reiterate some of it with some visuals, and so let me go through it. You can call this slide 2. It's a picture of the existing building on 203-205 Nassau. The previous use was residential on the second and third floor, office and retail, which used to be the flower station on the first floor. The building was previously owned by Sandy Zeitler, and people who have been in town for a while, he doesn't have a very good reputation for the way he takes care of his buildings. And as you heard from Mr. Harrison's testimony, the building is in very bad structural shape, partly because of the neglect and the poor maintenance from the previous owner. Slide 2 is a closer image of the front elevation.
That's slide 3. Slide 3.
Excuse me. Slide 3 is a closer image of the front elevation of the entryway. Currently, the steps and the landing encroach 4 feet into the municipal right-of-way, obstructing the sidewalk for pedestrians. This is the right side elevation off Charlton. You can see in the back the more recent addition. It's in clapboard. At some point, there was an addition done that extends in the rear of the building. What am I at now? 2, 3, 4. Slide 5. Slide 5 and the couple extra slides coming up are just a couple pictures of the interior of the building. This picture is of a foyer. The stairs and other parts of the building are really not safe in particular areas. The building department put an orange warning sticker because of some of the unsafe conditions. This is a slide 6 picture of one of the single occupancy rooms. The tenant, when he left, took the window with him. He did that because when he moved in, Sandy didn't want to fix the original window. It was broken, so the tenant put his own window in, and when he left, he took it with him. When we finally got this building and we saw that, we boarded it up. For this picture, I took the boarding down just so over that time, obviously there was some damage done. At one point, there was a hole in the roof. Sandy put a piece of cardboard there to cover it up. He didn't ever want to spend any money to really take care and maintain the building, and that caused lots of damage over time. Just a couple more pictures. This is just, doesn't look very nice. There was maybe a dozen people there. They shared one toilet, and again, the building wasn't taken care of. This building also had an extensive history of 911 complaints and health concerns. I attached one of the reports, which was like a weekly occurrence. There was almost 100 of them in the file I got. This one is the 2 tenants were having a knife fight on the sidewalk in front of the building, and we'll leave it at that. This memo is from the health department. This building had one of the worst bed bug infestations. Finally, Sandy, after spending time in court, agreed to clean it up, and as of right now, it's okay, but it did have that problem at some point. So now that I've covered the modern day history of the building,
This is slide 11.
I'll illustrate the location and proposal for the new construction application. This is a picture of the tax map, 203-205 Nassau Street, obviously located on Nassau on the corner of Charlton. Slide 12 shows the surrounding land uses. To the north of the building is the St. Paul's Roman Catholic Church and School. To the east is a mix of joint occupancy buildings, a couple small office buildings, and a dry cleaner down at the end. To the west are some more joint occupancy buildings and Princeton University academic buildings, and there is also some single-family residential uses. And to the south, again, joint occupancy, single-family, multifamily, and across the street from this picture is more Princeton University campus.
So for Mr. Porter, who's trying to keep up, items 12 through 15 were northeast, west, and south. We're now going to slide 16, which references the proposed site plan.
So for the following slides, I'd like to go over the staff plus the subcommittee's memos and comments. All the language that has parentheses around it came directly quoted from staff's memos.
Quotation marks. Parentheses, quotation marks.
Parentheses, quotation marks, I'm sorry. So the building is being rebuilt within the same footprint with a slightly smaller FAR under Section 17A-403. The use will stay the same as a mixed-use building with the same amount of retail space on the first floor and 3 two-bedroom apartments on the second and third floor. Highlighted in red on this site plan is the footprint of the existing building.
Going to slide 18.
Slide 18.
This is 18
This is 18.
proposed.
This is the proposed footprint, highlighted in yellow. It stays within the same limitations as in the previous slide. In fact, on the next slide, I'll exhibit how the proposed building is actually more conforming in certain criterias. Slide 19. This chart shows the zoning bulk requirements for the RO zone. All of the criteria are in compliance or grandfathered in under the reconstruction ordinance. In green, the proposed standards are more conforming than what is existing or currently there. There's less building coverage, a little bit less FAR, a little bit more open space, and all the setbacks are more conforming. Specifically, the stairs that protrude 4 feet over the lot line will be removed, and the sidewalk opened up for pedestrians. Slide 20. This slide shows side by side the existing building and proposed building. As you can see, the dimensions are the same, from the footprint all the way to the peaks at each dormer. As you go up, the footprint stays the same, almost like a 3D replication of what's currently there. This is a closer-up view of the front elevation. The main front door in the center of the building is for access to the apartments, and the entranceway to the retail, where the flower station used to be, is to the right. The rendering on this slide shows clapboard siding. However, SPRAB and the historical subcommittee suggested that we use brick, and we agree with their recommendation, and we propose to use brick for the site. We also intend to use AZEK, which is a maintenance-free fascia board for exterior trim work, and GIF Timberline shingles on the roof. This is the right side elevation off of Charlton. Also, again, it's the same dimensions that is what's currently on site at the moment. This is a picture of the rear of the building. Same thing, same specs as the building has right now. What number am I on now?
The rear was 23, the left will be 24, so 21 through 24 are the facades of the building.
I have one more, so 25. Right.
I'm sorry,
20
is 24
24 is the left side, left side.
That's where I'm at right now.
Right.
24 is left side. So, those are all the elevation drawings. This is slide 25, and the next couple slides will show the interior layout of the proposed building. The first floor will have less than 1,000 square feet of retail, which is to the right, and to the left, offices and a common stairwell to the apartments above in the back. The second floor has 2 apartments. Each have 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, a living room and a kitchen. And the third floor has one apartment, also with 2-bedroom and 2-bathroom.
Yeah. So you're going to the site plan comments next?
Yeah.
That's going to be 28. This was 27.
Okay. So this was slide 27, slide 28. So for this slide and the upcoming slides, there are site plan comments. Again, in quotes, are comments from Derek, Jack, Lee, etc. This particular slide illustrates no adverse ecological conditions are anticipated.
Landscape is 29.
29. Slide 29. We're proposing a replacement of 3 trees, which are highlighted in green, and we'll work with the arborist, municipal arborist, on what type of species she'd like to see there. Just a quick comment, there is a mistake on the report. It says that we're taking down a tree on Charlton Street. That was off the original proposal. With this new proposal, we're not taking any street trees down on Charlton.
This is slide 30.
Slide 30. The relation of proposed structures to the environment. The existing building has not been properly maintained. The new building should be an improvement over the existing conditions. 31?
Yes.
Slide 31. So 203, 205 Nassau Street is not designated historical, nor is it designated a historical structure. The Historical Commission approached us previous to our last scheduled planning board meeting. We moved our approval presentation to today so that we can meet with the Historical Subcommittee about half a dozen times. They expressed their interest in saving the building, so we spent a lot of man-hours and spent some money to explore if and how the building could be saved. Originally, we hired a forensic structural engineer to assess the restoration possibilities. His report came back very negative, essentially saying the building could not reasonably be restored. The Historical Subcommittee asked that we hire through the town their own structural engineer, Mr. Harrison, who we heard from today, who has more experience maybe with historical buildings, older buildings, to make another assessment. We received his report. We heard from him tonight. After the second report came very unfavorable, we came to terms that the building could and should not be attempted to save. But again, we did spend some time with Historical to see what opportunities were there, and I think that we exhausted all of those after having already a couple engineers and contractors go through there. But I emphasize again that the building is not designated historical. For surface water drainage, 32. For surface water drainage, there is an increase of 283 square feet for impervious, so we are going to tie the downspouts into the municipal storm sewer. We agreed to do that.
33.
33. Slide 33, disposal of waste and recycling arrangements. The proposed trash recycling will be located in the rear yard, and we must contract with a private refuse hauler, and we agreed to that.
34.
34, slide 34, has to do with noise. We agreed to work within the time constraints under the ordinances, and the 5 AC units that are on the ground floor, we're going to use higher efficiency units so that to reduce the sound levels. Affordable housing, of course, we agree to that. We pay the affordable housing fee.
Now on to 36.
So that was slide 35. Slide 36, there were some criterias which didn't apply, but I wanted to put all of them there to show that we agree to all of the comments that do apply that we got off the staff memo. There were some additional comments, recommendations. Actually, they've already been incorporated into the site plan. We agree to all of them. Just briefly going over it, sidewalk should be replaced. If there's any work done on Charlton Street, it will require infrared. We talked about the street trees. We agree to that. So all the additional comments and recommendations we also agree to.
38 is the SPRAB.
Slide 38, we met with SPRAB on May 16th, and they had some additional comments as well. On slide 39, their recommendations, we agree to all their recommendations. The first couple were more clerical. They had to do with updating the new drawings from the old ones. They asked that the proposed retail space not be a food establishment. We agreed to that. We talked about the materials here tonight that we'll be using. They asked for the facade to have brick, and we agreed to that as well. What is this, 39?
This is 40.
40. Slide 40 continues on with the recommendations. Street trees to be replaced, which we agreed to. Working with the landscape architect. They also wanted a bicycle rack, which we will provide. We agree to that. And they wanted to increase the trash enclosure to include organic waste, which we will do. We agree to. Again, with the AC units, we're going to use higher efficiency AC units. And business signs in conformance with the code. So we agree to all the recommendations from the SPRAB.
41.
41. Slide 41 is Princeton's Environmental Commission. They offered a series of comments. We recognize the importance of the recommendations in the PEC report. Given the site constraints, it's difficult to provide everything requested. However, we do intend to implement any recommendations that can be reasonably achieved. To go through them, A and B have to do with trying to incorporate a green roof.
Is it possible to make that larger in?
It's Lee's report. You have it in front of you in hard copy. It's page 4 of Lee's report.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Since the dimensions are the same from the existing building, there's no flat roofs to incorporate a green roof. The solar panels need a larger span of roof to be productive. The roof is broken up into many peaks and valleys. Comment C talks about topsoil off-site. We will evaluate the recommended comment during the work phase with our engineer, but we don't anticipate that there's going to be any topsoil stock on such a small site. For D, was incorporate substantial practices. Sustainable, sorry, it is small. Incorporate sustainable practices. We will consider the sustainable practices with our architect and implement them when we can. For E, provide protected bike parking, and SPRAB requested the same thing, so we do agree and intend to put bike parking for the tenants or people who are working at the retail. F.
Compost.
Yep, compost. So we did address the waste management in our site plan, and we'll investigate the possibility for an area for compost waste, but we do intend on expanding the area for that, and along with organic waste that SPRAB recommended. G has to do with the
Parking.
charging station for parking, but as we know in this application, there is no parking, so. H has to do with providing a shower for retail. We'll consider providing an option for the tenant to add a shower to the bathroom during the fit-out for the tenant. I has to do with Energy Star, incorporating Energy Star. So we'll implement as many Energy Star efficient appliances and improvements with the consideration from our architect. However, we normally do use Energy Star rated furnaces, appliances, windows, and doors. J is air quality. So we're going to look in with our HVAC contractor how to improve air quality, but obviously we're going to comply with the building ordinances which address that as well. For K, is asking about recycling debris. So we'll investigate potential for recycled debris with suppliers. And the last couple talk about FSC lumber and green materials. We'll coordinate with our architects, suppliers, and contractors to look for opportunities to use the FSC lumber and green materials and avoid red list materials. I don't know what slide I'm on anymore.
Slide 42.
Slide 42. This was the original structural engineer report. On slide 43, he gives his summary here. Building's been neglected for years, water and insect infiltration, improper repairs such as painting of the brick facade has caused brick damage, structural damage. Numerous failings and crushing structural elements were observed. Failing rubble and brick foundation, no sound structural elements that can be temporarily supported while damaged and deteriorated sections are repaired, replaced. And I believe Mr. Harrison confirmed that as well. His report is on the last couple slides here. What number is this one?
44.
44, 45, 46, 47. His report, you guys have all seen that, and we've heard from him tonight. So we've agreed with all of the staff's comments and recommendations, along with working diligently and agreeing to comments from advisory boards. We've spent additional time and money to exhaust all options in restoring the building, though it's not deemed historic. We have heard and seen from 2 reports from structural engineers whom agree that the building should be demolished and that the new building would be an improvement. Our application is compliant with no variances and even relieves some of the nonconformities, even if it's only a little. So we ask the planning board to grant us approvals tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions, board?
I have
Yes.
a question. Just in reference to SPRAB's comment number 5, where they say because the building is historic, then the new building has to use exactly the same materials as the existing building. So they specified brick because it's a brick building, and then even said maybe you should paint the brick, which is, I don't think, ever a good idea. But the thing I wanted to point out is that the Secretary of the Interior standards specifically does not say that when you're replacing an existing historic structure, you should make a fake historic structure. And I just wanted internally everyone to know that I think it was sort of out of line for SPRAB to request this, given that that's not really the field of their expertise. And And that said, I think clapboard or brick, I mean, I just think that your possibilities for using other materials shouldn't be restricted because of SPRAB's comment.
I think we're open to either or, but we've heard from two different subcommittees asking, so we're either or.
Okay, Ms. Carmona?
Well, two things. Does that mean that you feel that brick is not appropriate, or do you feel like that's not painted is?
Well, personally, I feel that a new structure really is not going to resemble the existing structure. So I don't really see an issue, but
you don't see anything wrong with brick. I'm just
I'm
as a
just saying
historic.
that if you're trying to match something, that it's, okay.
You can't talk from
I think you have to use the microphone.
Okay, so I just had another, and I wanted to say thank you for all the effort you made to try to say, to look at the options. I really appreciate that, and it's a shame that it couldn't happen. The one question I had was about the bike parking. A couple times you mentioned that you were having bike parking, but is it covered parking? Bike parking?
I guess I would have to run that by Derek. I'm not sure if covered is
FAR space.
FAR. It is, so
Yes, it would be considered FAR.
I think we have some room in the ordinance because we're a little less than what's there. I think
If you have room, that's,
I think if we fit it within the room that we have, we will have covered bicycle parking.
Okay.
Mr. Kern?
While we're talking about FAR, there was this other recommendation from SPRAB that some of the low-slope roofs be considered as balconies, which I think is a nice idea, but you've only got a limited balcony exemption under FAR, so that might also put you into a variance condition.
They're not covered porches, so if there's not a roofed area, it's not FAR.
Okay, all right. I did have just a couple of other comments. In terms of the recycling, the demolition debris, I think that that's a pretty important comment since you're taking down a whole building there, and a lot of it should be recyclable. It's really just a question of getting dumpsters from the right hauling agency where they will take the debris and repurpose it rather than putting it in a landfill. So I just wanted to be clear on that because your reflection on the comment didn't seem to fully understand the implications there.
I guess there's some concern. The reports say that it's rotted, the bricks are falling apart. It's the recyclability, the usability of some of those materials.
The intent is not to, take the wood and use it in a new structure. It's just to compost it, or, I mean, that's considered recycling
Right.
as
So,
well. It's just to make sure it's diverting from landfill.
We
It's not-
would look into that opportunity, given the nature of the age of the materials. If it's feasible, we would like to look into that.
Yeah, I think that's, I had one other comment, which is that the existing building, according to the plans, has a fire escape. I believe that when you have third-floor residential, you need a second means of egress, and the plans don't seem to show that currently. I understand from Lee that the fire official did not review these plans, but it's something you should determine quickly and get the plans, I think you're gonna need to modify the plans. I'm not even sure if fire escape is allowed for new construction either, so it might need to be an internal second means of egress.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Quinn?
How are deliveries expected to be handled to the retail piece here with no parking and a narrow street? Has any thought been given to what's going in there? Obviously, we know it's not going to be a food establishment, but what the deliveries will look like going in and out?
We don't have a tenant lined up yet, or the use that the tenant would need, but in my experience with the building, down Charlton, there's usually some parking there, and for some reason or another, across the street from the building, on the same side as the church, there's almost always parking there too. It's odd because Princeton's always so busy, but I'm always able to pull up a spot. But I think we're going to find a tenant that's not going to have those really type of heavy needs, so.
Yes, anyone else? Yes, David?
Well, I guess I'd just like to re-raise the question that I raised for Lee at the beginning about parking for those apartments. I mean, I took a look at the ordinance, that's section 17A 403, about reconstructing an existing building. I'm not sure if there's a definition of reconstruction in the ordinance, but clearly this plan has changed. It's not a strict reconstruction, and if the parking demand is different, and I'm not suggesting you should be providing it on site, but I'd like to know, I'd like you to reflect a little bit what you imagine for those tenants of those apartments for their parking needs.
So the choice is to go back to single occupancy rooms with knife fights and bed bugs, or to have 3 handsome apartments. They're so close to the university, they're so close to transit, to all of the walkable opportunities, that he's taking a business risk, frankly, not to provide parking. And I'll say that about a year and a half ago, we presented a plan that had parking, and we're told that the building really needed to conform inch by inch to the geometry of the existing building and not exceed it so as to allow for parking under the building. So we withdrew that and presented a clapboard building of the same size and scale of the one that's there. So we've tried every which way, but the owner's intention and expectation is that people will be excited about these apartments with the bicycles.
Well, I believe the primary demand will come from university professors and faculty, and especially recently, there's a lot of demand for it to be right on that side and downtown, and so the idea is for university people to be using that space, and from talking to them, it sounds like they don't drive or they don't want to drive, and that walking or bicycle would be okay.
Yes. Mayor Lampert?
Yeah, I applaud you for that. I would just encourage you to be really clear to whoever is going to be moving in there that that's the expectation, because we've had a lot of heartache. I know Ms. Krummeler can confirm, is people move into a place and then demand that we change ordinances or produce parking for them when that was never intended. And so I think it just needs to be a clear communication. If this is supposed to be car-free living, then I think I would go with that as part of the marketing, so it's clear to who's ever there that we're not going to have a problem down the road.
Yeah, I want to second that, or that they can find their own parking and pay for it, but it's not part of the rent.
But that might not even be available because there's a waiting list for a lot of the garages. so
Those
you just want-
opportunities exist on private property on the tree streets. There are a number of properties which rent on an annual basis for parking. So if somebody truly wanted to, university folks can usually find a space in the lots down the hill. But, you know, they'll find a place if they truly want to have a car.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, Mr. Porter?
Yeah, could we go back to the materials? I guess there was a request for a materials board, which we don't need, but could we be clear as to what the materials that are intended and the extent to which the two boards, how we should reconcile those two recommendations? Or is this something that that should be left to be worked out with historic preservation?
The Board of Jurisdiction is SPRAB. I respectfully, I think we agree on that. And we preferred clapboard. We presented a drawing with a clapboard building. SPRAB is advisory to you all. And our preference was for clapboard, but we acquiesced to accommodate SPRAB, acquiesced to work with HPC, just acquiescent.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I I know several of those architects on SPRAB, and I don't think that they were trying to, create an ersatz historic building. I think that this was just their sort of design review recommendation for a structure of this scale and this location, and I'm glad the applicant's agreeable to it.
Brick?
And what are the other materials you item?
For the exterior, all the fascia board, so what the windows are wrapped in, the corners of the building, they're going to be AZEK.
How do you spell that?
A-Z-E-K, I think, A-Z-E-K. The purpose is it's maintenance-free. It's the best quality product you can put. It doesn't rot. And the point is for the building to be there for a long time. So, and we use a Timberline GIF shingle.
About the balance of the siding? Is it clapboard? Is it
Hardy? But I think we're...
I'm sorry,
If you
are these
address
shown on the revised plans, these materials?
Yeah, the elevation drawings that I showed you were intended for hardy plank siding. Then SPRAB recommended brick, so brick.
And I just wanted to point out, and I think Elric agrees with me, that, if you use brick, it's still not going to exactly resemble the existing building. I just wanted to point out that I felt that was kind of restrictive. I understand the spirit of it.
Yes.
We've been quiescent. If the planning board, taking the recommendations from the several groups that report to you, if you want, as a group, you want brick, we'll have brick. We had clapboard. We really just need to move forward.
Yes, Mr. Solo?
I think Derek and I were talking, the Nassau Street facade will be brick. That's what I heard you say, I think, with the trim and AZEK, right?
Right.
The other sides of the building, there are 3 other sides. Are they brick? Are they hardy plank? Or are they something else?
I think the intention was to have Nassau Street and Charlton Street in brick, and the other 2 in hardy plank siding.
I'm fine. I just want to be clear so that when we write it correctly if the board agrees.
As far as streetscape goes, where you see the building, because it's on the corner, off Nassau of Charlton in brick, and in the rear and the left side in hardy plank siding. And I think Mr. Cohen depicted accurately that I think SPRAB wasn't trying to replicate the old building. I think they just thought it would look nicer, so.
Okay. If we're clear on the materials now, I'd really like to open the meeting to the public. So is there anyone here who'd like to speak to this application or say a few words about it? No one? Yes, Mr. Endersby.
I'm fully aware of the fact that the HPC has no jurisdiction over the new building, but I think what Ms. Capozzoli was speaking to before...
I can't hear you again. The microphone doesn't seem to be working.
Other people, it's my voice. What Ms. Capozzoli was speaking to before is the notion of replicating or attempting in some vein to replicate the original building. And we are very much, we anyway, are very much of the opinion that what's been proposed is the scale of it is appropriate for Nassau Street and in the spirit of the building that was there before. But when they talk about the proportions on the lot running from one side to the other and the depth of the lot, yes, they are very similar to the proportions that are there. But by dropping the building 4 feet, the character of the new structure is going to be very different from the old. And just as a member of the public, not representing the HPC, I would say that I would give you more license to come up with a new building which has its own character and isn't necessarily trying to reflect the old. The only other point I would make is that this is a significant building, and as we have asked under our own capacity in reviewing other projects at the HPC, we would ask that there be an opportunity to record the interior of the buildings with both photographs and measurements, and that if there are features of the original building that can be saved in cooperation with your demolition contractor, we would very much like to see that followed.
The owner's only concern is, as was the case with the structural engineer that you hired to go into it, he had insurance. As long as anybody who goes in there is covered by municipal insurance, because it is truly an unsafe structure, and goes in under the auspices of the HPC and quickly takes photographs, I know that would be acceptable.
I don't know, I think that's something that will have to be discussed between HPC and the municipality.
Just one thing, I think it is a requirement before demolition that photographs are taken. I think that's a requirement, exterior photographs, okay.
But we've met each other a lot of times now. I mean, we'll work it out. So we'll accommodate.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to this? Yes. Okay. All right. If there are no public comments, let me close the public portion. Are there further board comments on this? Yes. Ms. Ullman?
I probably walked by this building 25,000 times in the last 50 years. I feel like, it's sort of part of the town's DNA. I am really amazed by this dossier. This application has been through every single subcommittee we have. It's been revised. I applaud the applicant for being willing, probably, to go through it. I think we've come out in a really great place. I think the process, however long and arduous, has come to a place where the community as a whole benefits, and I really appreciate that. I think it's in a good place now.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments further?
I was just going to second what Ms. Ullman said and thank the applicant for being so accommodating. And I just want to make sure that the board is all clear on the exterior material, because the applicant's so accommodating that I just want to make sure that we're giving clear direction as to how to accommodate us.
I think I'm clear that you're going to make it brick, and you get to choose the brick bond. Was that the choice? I heard Mr. Endersby say something about Flemish bond and so on. I think you at least get a choice in what the exterior pattern of the brick is. Yes, two sides brick, the other
To
hardy
confirm,
plank.
the front and right side elevation brick, the rear left side hardy plank. I think that's what Sprab liked, and so.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Well, if there are no further
I move
comments,
the application.
that was
I move to approve the application.
thank you, Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
I second that.
Can we just deal with one issue? To the extent it requires a fire escape, what's the
We'll
approval process?
comply with it, right?
Depends if it needs a variance. I mean, I would make every opportunity, as David said, to accommodate it in the building. I don't know if I'll have to see. I don't know if the fire escape works, but you'll have to comply with the fire code regardless, so.
And my working assumption is that might be a minor site plan modification of the building that could be dealt with.
Why don't you just submit it to staff for review?
Right.
Okay. Is that okay? Your motion stands. And the second?
It's with all the conditions that are in the report that have been accepted by the applicant and those in the PEC report which have been described or the applicant will work with.
Okay. So, can I ask you to call the roll on that, please?
Ms. Capizzoli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Krummiller?
Yes.
Mayor Lempert?
Yes.
Mrs. Trotman?
Yes.
Mrs. Ullman?
Yes.
Mrs. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like
Yes.
rest?
Yes. Can we take a 5-minute break? Are you staying on? We're going to have it for the rest of the meeting. Okay. Then let's have a 5-minute break. Oh, but I love that building. I feel sick that it's been destroyed.
I do, it is. I mean, it's acknowledged in the shape.
It's not the same thing as like having an antique and
I
having
know
a
it.
reproduction.
I know it. But how do you can't let it just,
Well, we really need an upkeep ordinance.
I was very struck by what, I don't know how many other buildings of that
There are plenty.
age are there. Why wouldn't they be identified?
Why aren't they identified? Actually, because the borough would never spend the money
Yeah.
for a survey of things going to that age.
Yeah, the slides are slide number.
She's back in the driver's seat over there.
Okay, if we can get everybody together. Oh, I think that would look tacky on Nassau Street. It would look tacky on Nassau Street.
All the other buildings are clapboard except for the university offices.
They're not all clapboard. There's one that's Bricko, and there are all kinds of surfaces. I think that it'll probably sell better if it's more substantial
brick
looking.
is obviously very nice, particularly in the cement too.
Jenny. All right, if we're all back in our seats, let's go on to the next hearing. Everyone, this is Daniel and Tamara Scavere. It's a minor subdivision. It's 109 Rolling Mead, Block 7601, Lot 39. And I guess I'm going to ask Mr. Solo if he'll go over this for us, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
Yes, Mr. Solo, welcome back.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this application?
I do. Thank you and good evening. Again, as the chair indicated, this is a minor subdivision for 109 Rolling Mead, Block 7601, Lot 39. I'm going to be speaking using this board. It's the minor subdivision plat, sheet number 2. It is in your packet. It may help orient everybody. What I've done on this sheet is in black, I've outlined the existing property as well as shown you where the subdivision is, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. At the top of the map is Rolling Mead, which then turns into Little Brook Road. Little Brook Road North is located here towards the right of the property itself. Back in June, the board's minor subdivision committee met to review this application and withheld approval with the intent that the full board should hear the application. During the committee's meeting, many neighbors expressed concerns with the impact the subdivision would have on the streetscape and neighborhood character. There were also concerns raised by the neighbors to the south about maintaining an informal access from Locust, which is shown here in the middle of the map. Nassau Street would be down here off the map to the south. And evidently there is an informal arrangement amongst the neighbors to allow the children that are to the south to use Locust and then cut through the Scavere property, the subject property, getting to Rolling Mead and going to the schools. We were informed that most of those were middle school and high school kids that were walking to the school. Also, a representative from the Canassa Park Homeowners Association appeared and indicated they believe there are private deed restrictions against re-subdividing the property. We talk a little bit about the property. The existing property has a house on it. That's outlined here in brown. The existing lot is approximately 2.26 acres or 98,502 square feet. It's on the east side of Rolling Mead between Little Brook Road North and Deer Path. The rear of the lot slopes down and is wooded. There are 2 open grass areas on the site, one around the existing house and the other in the central part of what will be the proposed lot to the left. This property is in the R5 zone within the former township, which permits single-family homes on half-acre lots or lots that are 21,780 square feet. As I indicated earlier, the applicant is proposing to create 2 lots. Lot 39.01, which is the lot to the left, will contain 43,500 square feet and be the site of a new dwelling. Lot 3902 to the east and to the right of the site will contain 54,942 square feet, as well as the existing residence. There are no variances associated with this application. I'm going to briefly summarize the engineer's report again. Alina Ferrara is here sitting in for Jack West, and his comments were that any new development will have to comply with the stormwater regulations in the municipality. Any tree removal will require a permit. A tree protection plan will need to be provided prior to the start of any construction. He's requested that the applicant agree that the driveway for the new house on Lot 39.01 be no closer than 5 feet to any lot line. He's asked that the applicant replace the existing asphalt driveway apron with concrete, that 2 new shade trees be added, 2 for each lot. And then there are a series of standard engineering conditions regarding the survey itself that they've asked for. That's a summary of the application. Again, Mr. Bridger, the zoning officer, is here, as is Alina, if you have any questions for myself or the staff.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Sella? Yes, Ms. Ullman?
Lee, can you explain to me about the Carnassa Park Homeowners Association? Do we have any, do we have any authority with regard to that?
Not really. Those are private deed restrictions and need to be enforced privately. We've had a couple applications come in the Carnassa Park neighborhood. They also, I think, have design review of any additions or new construction. In the past, the board has acted per the zoning and granted subdivisions, and then the Carnassa Park Homeowner Association has a procedure and will either go to court, or you'll probably hear some of that discussion tonight as to whether or not the proper procedures to allow a subdivision have been followed. But again, they're private and we don't enforce them. I don't know, Alan, did you want to add anything?
Just to reinforce that the role of this board is to review and apply the existing public requirements as set forth in the zoning. There are all types of issues that come up in connection with private restrictions in terms of how they're applied, whether they're still in force, what type of other issues that might be argued about them that this board is, first of all, doesn't have jurisdiction to deal with and is not equipped to deal with in terms of making judgments about standards that might be ambiguous or enforceability. So, in short, the Carnassa Park regulations are not a bar to anything that the applicant may propose, and you've laid out what the zoning standards are. Thank you.
But can I ask a follow-up question about that? So does that mean that the deed restrictions, I mean, let's just say that we look at that the deed restrictions are enforceable, they're just not enforceable by us, but they are enforceable in the court of law, correct?
Correct.
So,
I mean,
aren't we kind of helping break the law if we know that the deed restrictions are being violated and we approve the, I don't know any about the deed restrictions, but.
I guess the answer is not really. There are 2 sets of regulations. We only deal with ours, and ours don't give the applicant any rights to break the private restrictions.
Okay.
They still have to abide by them, but not here.
Okay. And did we look at them, or did you look at the deed restrictions, or it's just, since they're not our purview, we don't look at them at all?
Basically, I think the only one that's been cited is, well, I'm not sure that's true, but I was going to say no further subdivision, but I'm not sure whether that's the only one. But even if there were more, they're not for us to apply or interpret.
Did you have a question?
I had a similar question, and I just want to be 100% clear, because I'm uncomfortable with this too, if there's some regulation out there that our approval, if we were to approve this, it says nothing about superseding any sort of other homeowners agreement or anything else. So, and the process would be if the homeowners association feels like the deed restriction is being broken, then they have to go to court? Is that the process
It's
for that?
enforceable privately, and the process would be a court action. And we really don't have jurisdiction to get into that, even if we're uncomfortable about it.
Right. It just feels that, we love lawyers, but it would be nice to have some, I'd rather not be in a position where we're sending neighbors out to sue each other, and but I don't know what options we have.
I think I've been clear that that's not our issue. And I guess Carnassa Park restrictions probably go back 50 years, and the neighborhood has coped with them over that period of time with not much litigation, as I understand it.
Yes, Mr.
I
Crowe?
just want to comment that, my own property is governed by some separate deed restrictions, and I think that the fact is, if the deed restrictions are clear, we're not sending people out to sue each other because no one's going to want to break a clear enforceable deed restriction. It's just totally not in their interest. They'll get taken to court and they'll lose a lot of money and they'll have to pay the other guy's court costs as well as their own. So I think we're only sending them out to sue each other if the deed restrictions are unclear. And if that's the case, we really don't want to get in the middle of it.
Anyone else?
Thank you. We'll turn it over
Thank
to
you,
the
Mr.
applicant.
Solo. Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Good evening. Chris Tarr representing the applicant. To my side,
Chris, could you get closer to the microphone? I can't.
good evening. So to my right is Tamara Scavir and also Jim Kamalik. If we could all be sworn together?
Certainly. There is some, do you each swear or affirm to testify truthfully? Maybe just state your name and respond.
James Kamalak, yes.
Tamara Turkevich Skavir, yes.
Chris Tarr, yes. As was the case with the earlier presentation, we have a slide presentation of several slides. I do, for Mr. Porter, have a copy of those slides. I'm going to bring it up.
Again, this will be Exhibit A1.
So, Mr. Kamalik is a professional engineer, professional planner, has testified before this board in the past. I'll ask him whether he's currently licensed and whether he prepared these engineering drawings. Mr. Kamalik?
Yes, I am currently licensed.
And so why don't you go ahead, and Mr. Kamalik's going to begin the presentation with those engineering drawings so that we can orient you to the site.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I've included on...
Just make sure you can be heard.
Sure.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And again, as in the prior application, if you could put a number on each slide so a record is clear.
Okay.
I've numbered them. Good evening, everyone. I've included on slide number 2 of the presentation the key map, which indicates the subject property consisting of approximately 2.2 acres, a residential lot fronting on Rolling Mead, which has an existing residential dwelling that is proposed to be subdivided into 2 lots. This key map does illustrate the heavy black line in the central portion of the slide, which is the zone boundary between the R5 zone, which is to the left or to the south, and the R4 zone, which is to the north or to the upper right of your screen. And you'll notice that this particular lot is somewhat unique in that it is located within the R5 zone, where predominance of the remaining Carnassa Park lots are located in the R4 zone. So you can also reference the approximate sizes and scale of the lots surrounding the subject property in terms of the relative size, as there are a significant amount of smaller lots in this particular neighborhood. Slide 3 is entitled Aerial Map, and this is a aerial photograph of the subject property on Rolling Mead. It does illustrate the location of the existing dwelling in the upper right-hand portion of the lot, and it also gives you a sense of the surrounding neighborhood and the location of those residential dwellings within their respective lot lines. And if you look around in a 360-degree view around the lot, you can see that there are several lots in the area, some a little bit larger to the top of the screen in the R4 district, but then as you look down on the bottom of the screen, you can see somewhat narrow lots where the dwellings are located in the center of those lots, but in close proximity to the adjacent property lines. This application is a minor subdivision on the plans before you, which you have hard copies of. Just to summarize, the lot will be subdivided, is proposed to be subdivided into two lots. The lot on the right that would house the and continue to maintain the existing dwelling at 1.26 acres, and the lot on the left at 1.0 acres, basically divided somewhat in the center, following what is a natural dividing line of vegetation and trees in the central portion of the lot, which is reasonable and appropriate. To summarize the context of the minor subdivision, again, this is a single-family residential use, which is an approved use in the zone. That will be maintained. The zoning is the R5 residential zone, where the minimum lot size is 1/2 acre or 0.5 acres. In this particular case, the minor subdivision proposes two lots, one at 1.26 acres and a second at 1.0 acres. And as you can see, each of these lot sizes are 2 times greater than the minimum lot size allowed in the zone. So it's certainly, these lots do exceed the minimum requirement substantially, while still being in keeping with the lot sizes of the surrounding lots in both the R4 and R5 zone. We'd like to iterate that the minor subdivision is fully conforming in all respects with respect to the zoning requirements in the ordinance. And the only reason that we're here tonight, maybe other related issues to this application, which normally would be approved by the subdivision committee, as common on other minor subdivision projects. Lastly, we'd like to say that the proposed lot areas are indeed greater than many of the lots in terms of lot area in the immediate R5 neighborhood, and well exceed the minimum lot area of 3/4 of an acre in the adjacent R4 zone, which is to the north and to the right, pursuant to the previous slide. And therefore, we conclude that these particular lots are very consistent with the neighborhood and the varying sizes within the neighborhood. Again, that slide that you can reference here. 6. Which is slide 6. With the subdivision line highlighted on the subject property, and you can compare the relative lot sizes, ultimately being in keeping with both of these neighborhoods here. As supporting information for the fully compliant minor subdivision, slide number 7 illustrates that it complies with all zoning requirements pursuant to the ordinance, and that is also indicated on the plans previously submitted. In terms of the staff review memos regarding this project, we've included on slide 8, I believe, the May 23rd review letter by Mr. West and Mr. Bridger. I'll go to slide 9 and highlight some of the comments and the applicant's compliance with those comments. Item number 1, that the new lot will be required to comply with the municipal stormwater management requirements. That will certainly be complied with at the time of plot plan submission for any new building on the new lot. As standard practice, property corners will be located for the new lots. The addresses here have been indicated as 107 and the remaining dwelling 109 Rolling Mead. That will be reflected on the revised plans, as well as meets and bounds descriptions for the final lots to be submitted for municipal review, and the horizontal and vertical coordinates for the survey map as item number 5. A tree removal permit will be submitted at the time of any disturbance on the lot or tree removal on the property, which is item number 6, that will be complied with, as well as providing a tree location plan indicating the trees that would be removed as part of any construction, and replacement trees as well to comply with the ordinance requirements. All utilities will be installed underground, and any required outside agency approvals pursuant to item number 9, Sewer Operating Committee, Mercer County Planning Board, which has already been approved. Sewer Operating Committee we have already received their approval, and given the conditions of the property and regulated wetland features along the rear property line, connection to the municipal storm system, which is also at the rear property line, will necessitate an approval from NJDEP in order to facilitate that sanitary line connection. A road opening permit will be applied for at the time of construction. The revised plans will include the 2 additional street trees that were requested, as well as the conservation easement that addresses the regulated environmental areas at the back relative to the existing wetland area and transition areas. The driveway will be located more than 5 feet from the property line. The survey adjustment will be made for the 100th of a foot digit, and the existing asphalt driveway apron will be replaced, and we will note that on the revised compliance plan to be reviewed by staff. So, in summary, all of the staff recommendations and requests the applicant will comply with pursuant to any approval by the board.
My name is Tamara Turkevich-Skavira, and I live at 109 Rolling Mead. I was barely 6 when my family, the Turkeviches, moved into its newly built ranch house at 109 Rolling Mead. In front of our house, Rolling Mead was a dirt road. In fact, both North Littlebrook and the Littlebrook roads, dead-end streets, were dirt roads. In time, the roads were paved, houses, Cape Cod's ranches, split levels, were erected, and Littlebrook School with its playground arrived. As a kid, I loved wandering through the extensive fields all the way up to Snowden Lane and following the brook to Overbrook Circle. There were very few trees. My parents had hoped to retire in our ranch house, but had not foreseen that maintaining such a large parcel of property would be as physically and financially draining on them. They decided that it would be wiser to move, and we inherited Rolling Mead in the early 80s. My father encouraged us to keep the field mown so it not be an eyesore for the neighborhood, and so the lone apple tree might be enjoyed. This we have done. He also forewarned us that if we ever considered subdividing the property, we need to understand the covenant which came with the property and to proceed with good common sense and good legal counsel. So from 1982, my family, now the Squeers, has enjoyed living at 109 Rolling Mead. Our daughters, as I did, played Frisbee and lacrosse on the field. My husband and our daughters, as I had many years earlier, saw the community around them change, evolve. First, it was the fine house and property across the street. The house doubled in size. A large barn appeared in the woods. Then many other houses were transformed into beautiful new dwellings. Less than a handful of the original homes from 1950 remain unchanged in the Carnassa Park community. It is very different from the original neighborhood I knew, but just as beautiful. By 2013, both my husband and I had retired from teaching. It was time to consider options for our future. We decided we wanted to remain in our ranch house. However, to do so, we would need to subdivide and sell the field. Otherwise, it would be a burden to us, as it was to my parents. We are blessed with good health and have had the time to proceed through all the necessary steps to do this correctly and legally. Our hope is to keep the feel of the neighborhood by having only one home on the 1-acre field and to remain at 109 Rolling Mead. We are long-standing members of the Princeton community. We are not developers, and we look forward to our future here, preferably on 109 Rolling Mead. Thank you.
Thank you, Tassi. Next slide. There were two views of the house, and do you keep numbering the slides for us?
13.
Yeah. There were two legal issues I wanted to mention to you before we let others speak. The Squeers and Dr. Turkevich before them allowed the neighborhood children to come up the hill and use the folks on Locust Lane to come up and on the way to the schools. Littlebrook School is just to the top of the slide. And they just walked across the open field, which is on the drawing as you see it here, just on the left-hand side of that drawing. In 2010, Bob Kaiser, our municipal engineer, approached the Squeers and said, you know, we really would like, as the town, we'd like to formalize this arrangement. You don't have insurance and people walking on your yard, and we don't have any comfort that this relationship would continue. So on the next slide shows that relationship of Locust Lane, just so you understand. The Route 227 is down at the bottom. Locust Lane is a cul-de-sac. There's no sidewalk on Roper Road all the way over to the side of the slide, so it was much safer for the children to just go down to the end of the cul-de-sac on Locust and go through the Squeers' yard to get up to Littlebrook. And that's what they did.
Mr. Tar, maybe if you went back to slide 6, that would show up better.
Yes.
Right?
The key map.
Yeah. The key map, this one. Yeah. They go, the folks who live on Locust, many of whom are sitting behind me over on this side as a group, very anxious to make sure that this arrangement continues. We're here to tell you we'd be happy to have it continue. And so this is what this legal issue we're going to talk about. If we could go to the slide, please, that has the document. And this is number
15.
So this is a license agreement which was executed in November of 2010 between the township and the Scaviers, which talks about providing pedestrian access across their property for school children attending the Littlebrook School. And so it's a formal legal document that exists. It's called a license because it could be revoked if it was abused, the sense being that there's every intention to keep it in place. But if the children were misbehaving in the woods or some other circumstance occurred there, or people were riding dirt bikes or whatever might occur, the property owner felt that they needed to be able to talk to the township and cut out that behavior. So it's characterized as a license agreement, but it's the intention of the owners to keep it in place. And I'd like to go back to that slide that showed this is the proposed location of that pathway is in green. In other words, right up the line between the two lots, meandering to avoid existing trees, but to form a relatively straight line up to Littlebrook Road, to Rolling Mead and then on to Littlebrook. It's crossing through some DEP-regulated areas, and there's a bit of a concern that if the DEP were to object, then it's proposed that the pathway go to the left, to the red line that would go up through an area that's less subject to the DEP areas. So the proposal is to mark it as being between the two lots, where the green line is. Only if there's an objection raised by the government, then it would go up where the red line is. But the license would remain in place and be modified only in the sense of the location of the path. So that's the first legal issue. There's a pathway that some of the neighbors are very anxious to have and that the Scaviers are anxious to keep in place. Second and last issue has to do with these private restrictive covenants. So you had it.
16.
This is slide 16. It's just the cover of the Cox textbook that you all know. And he speaks to this issue that you discussed as you started off, the relationship, or more accurately, the absence of a relationship between private covenants and public zoning and planning. So within his text, there's just some language which I've highlighted on the issue of restrictive covenants in deeds. And it reads, quote, "Sometimes a board may have before it a case in which a tract of land is subject to the terms of a restrictive covenant in the deed." I've skipped over some of the words, but I've given you the essence of that sentence. And down below it says, "Such a covenant in no way affects the jurisdiction of the board to grant a variance." The next sentence reads, "The grant of a variance in no way affects the validity of the covenant, nor the covenant the validity of the grant." And finally it says, "From the standpoint of the board, the existence of such a covenant is not a basis for denial." And it cites Davidson Brothers and some other cases. Again, for old Princeton files, the Davidson Supermarket was on Nassau Street. This was their store in New Brunswick, that they had a restrictive covenant against other grocery stores, and the court said that it had no bearing on zoning. So Mr. Cox tells us that they are not related in any way, and this is how we've proceeded in coming before you. So I hesitate to talk about the private restriction, but I thought you'd just be interested Mr. Cohen having a private restriction on his land and knowing that there's an issue here, we're not crazy. We're not coming in here ignoring that private restriction. And let me explain. Next slide is a deed from 1961. Mr. and Mrs. Johnston lived in Carnessa Park, and it's a deed signed by two-thirds of their Carnessa Park neighbors, indicating the neighbors' consent to the Johnstons subdividing their lot. They got municipal approval, they had this private approval, and they went about subdividing their lot. It was subdivided. The next slide is a document called a release of restriction, which we've worked on. I want to tell you, I started working with Dr. Turkevich in 1973 on this issue, and he was hell-bent, if I may say, to cause this to happen. He was one of the original Carnessa Park owners and occupants, the creators of Carnessa Park. He knew that there was a restriction against subdivision which would require, as we read it, two-thirds of the other owners to sign the document. We've listed here and on the next slide the 31 owners who've signed, had the notarized signatures on the document agreeing that in this case and in this case only, it was acceptable to those folks to have this lot subdivided for the Turkevich-Skavir family, which has lived there since the very beginning. And we're prepared to deal with that issue, but as Mr. Cox said, it's unrelated to what you're doing. And I know that you're going to hear tonight from folks who feel that they are related or that there's some issue that should come before you. You've got to deal with that as you choose. But it is our view that we've dealt with it. We've dealt with it effectively, and we just want this conforming. It's 2 times conforming. The zoning's half acre, the smallest lot is 1 acre. It's so substantially conforming that within your purview, where the staff has said everything's fine, we agree with all their suggestions, and it's conforming. So that's where we are. I'd hope that we could limit the comments to the subdivision that you're doing and any objections there are to it. But with that, we ask that the public be heard.
Can I ask a question about that? Are there examples of a board denying an application based on the covenants and then it's being challenged?
I think that's what Davidson was about. The Davidson supermarket said you can't have another supermarket here, and the court said, well, that's not the board's affair. And that's what, let's go back to that yellow.
But I thought that the zoning board approved it, but the covenants prevented it.
Well, what Mr. Cox says, whatever the facts were in any given case, that last sentence, from the standpoint of the board, the existence of such a covenant is not a basis for denial. So that's where we are tonight. We're asking you to approve, and the existence of a private covenant is not a basis for denial.
Yes.
Mr. Tarr, could you go back to the slide that showed the signatures on the subdivision? One of the last, that one. When was that signed?
Yeah, so.
When were they
last year.
Yeah, it was, I'm trying to remember now, because
It was last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
Right.
Then we filed here, and it takes a year to be heard. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
Yeah, just to clarify the record, I'm confused as to the purpose of the applicant's release of restrictions that you've submitted here. You're not asking the board to to verify anything. Are they irrelevant to your application here?
Absolutely irrelevant. But I thought that somebody made the comment, you'd be crazy to just fly in the face of restrictions. I should mention, there's one other case that occurred in 1964 in Carnessa Park. After the 1961, Mr. Peterson subdivided his land, and a builder just came in and he just didn't ask anybody anything. He just subdivided his lot. And a lawsuit was brought against him. You just can't unilaterally subdivide your land. And that fellow was precluded from doing it. But the model that we're following is the Peterson in 1961, who got the signatures. There are 45 lot owners. You need 2/3. And so that's what he did. That's what we did. And I'd bring it to your attention just if there's an anxiety. This is a tough legal question. It's not something you see all the time. It is utterly irrelevant according to Mr. Cox. And I brought it up reluctantly, but because you're going to hear about it, and I didn't want you to be confused any more than I could help.
Do you have copies of this for,
That's here.
I mean, you don't have
Yeah.
copies that we could look at?
It's irrelevant in technical terms. I just wanted you to know that 30...
No, I know.
So that's where we are. We did it reluctantly. It has
Is that
nothing...
list, when is that list, what year was that?
Last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let me just ask Alan Porter about this list, because I'm still a little bit confused. I would have thought that this was a group that made decisions rather than individually signing off on each thing. Is that?
Well, I think, let me respond. I think there are two issues here. There is, within the restrictions, as I understand it, the ability for 2/3 or whatever the number is to approve of something that's otherwise not permitted. And as I understand it, you're in the process of submitting this to Carnessa Park as satisfying the requirements for subdivision?
We met with the board. We're going to record it with the county clerk. It's, it's the process.
But for our purposes, can we view this as void and no purpose for our subdivision? I mean, otherwise the board is going to be...
I would view it as irrelevant, and I apologize if you took it in any other way. You will hear, I could have brought it up an hour from now and say, they're wrong, we're right. I just thought you'd want to understand.
Is the board going to be hearing testimony as to people who signed this and didn't understand what they signed or want to withdraw their... Because I'm going to tell the board that that's really not the issue before it.
Well, I understand, and so if that's, as has been discussed among you, if it comes to that, that will be the subject of private litigation, nothing to do with what you're deciding according to Mr. Cox. I brought it to your attention just to indicate that there were restrictions which exist. We've dealt with them in a way that we think is legal and proper, and all that you have before you is the drawing that you see on the screen, where the lots are twice the size that they're supposed to be.
All right, why don't we open the meeting to the public, and I'm going to ask you to come forward, be sworn in. You have about 3 minutes to give us your testimony. Why don't you just line up one behind the other?
Thank you.
And as maybe to save time, I'm going to... Excuse me?
This is working?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to ask each of you maybe in order to save time, rather than me asking you whether you swear or affirm to testify truthfully, for you to preface your remarks by something like, I swear to or affirm to testify truthfully, so that we can have a sworn record and not waste a lot of time doing that part of it. So proceed, thank you. Just state your name and spell it for the record.
Thank you. My name is Alan Zetterberg. I live at 124 Random Road, name is Alan Zetterberg, Z like zebra, Etterberg. I live at 124 Random Road, within the Carnassa Park area. I do swear to tell the truth, although I'm not sure that I'm giving testimony or what here. I am also the chairperson of the Carnassa Park Housing Board. Mainly, I would like to correct a number of misunderstandings or misstatements that have taken place in the record prepared by your staff and in what's been said tonight. First of all, for your general information, we do not have a homeowners association. There is no homeowners association. There are deed restrictions which apply to 45 properties, and they have so applied for 70 years. And there is a housing board that is created by those deed restrictions, and that housing board, which is duly elected by all 45 property owners, has the responsibility to enforce those deed restrictions. Secondly, and I'm turning now to the staff memorandum concerning this, section 4.1, there's a statement in there that the deed restrictions or some restrictions may or may not be valid. I cannot understand why there would be a statement that they may not be valid. Mr. Solo, when was making his presentation, he also made reference to whether they may be valid or not. I don't know where that comes from, but I assure you the deed restrictions are valid. That would not be disputed by the proponents before you. You can hear that they've gone to great efforts to try to, apparently try to comply with them. So we do have them, they are valid. Further, there was a notice letter sent out. I believe it's required. I'm not sure. I've never appeared before the planning board before. I'm not sure of exactly what the requirements are, but there is a notice letter that goes out to neighboring property owners. And I understand that that letter went to other property owners as well nearby. That letter stated that all Carnassa Park requirements have been met, and that is simply not true. So that information going, if it's in your record, I state that it's not true, and I state to those who received that letter that it is not true. They have not been met. I would also like to direct your attention to the minutes of the June 13th subcommittee meeting, which also states, in connection with what you've just been hearing about, that the proponents here have releases of 30 out of 45 residents. The housing board is in possession of more than 15 statements signed by owners that do not agree with the subdivision and do not support it, so you can do the math. Those don't add up, and we don't believe that the proponents do have, they may have something in their possession, but we don't believe they're valid, and in fact, we believe they were probably obtained based on incorrect information made to the people who were signing them. And likely those will eventually get into litigation, and we'll see where we wind up. But the Housing Board challenges those. Mr. Tarr just made the statement here in response to a question that we met with the board. In fact, there was a meeting last fall, a little over a year ago, I believe, at the Squeers home. That meeting was set up specifically for the Squeers and their attorney to present signatures to the board, and they did not present them. This is the first time we've seen that after a whole year on the screen tonight. A further point is that under the deed restrictions, getting 30 signatures or 2/3 of the owners does not allow you to subdivide your property. There is a different procedure for subdivision, and that procedure has not been met by the proponents. Now, lastly, I just want to speak to this issue that's been discussed by several of you, and it relates to this issue of the council being provided to you that the planning board should not consider private deed restrictions. I'm not going to dispute what's in this, the real estate law experts here, but I would say that what's happening here is that you're going to have an odd situation where if you approve this, you are going to be approving something that contravenes the law of the state of New Jersey. The law of the state of New Jersey, these deed restrictions are a part of the real estate law of the state of New Jersey. And so if the planning board approves this subdivision, it is in essence approving something that is in violation of the law. What we're hearing is the planning board has to go ahead under its own procedures. I'm not an expert on that. I defer to your counsel. But you wind up with a situation where you're approving something that can be said to be a violation of the law of the state of New Jersey. And the Housing Board, on behalf of the homeowners who elected them, do intend to initiate litigation when and where appropriate in order to protect the deed restrictions and the no subdivision clause contained therein. I'd be happy to address any questions that any of you would have now or later. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Grayson Barber. Let me spell that for you. My first name is Grayson, Grayson. My last name is Barber, Barber. I swear to tell the truth. I live at 68 Locust Lane, and I'd like to step away from the microphone for a brief moment to show you where 68 Locust Lane is. So, as I showed you on the map, I'm immediately south of the Scaviers property, and my property is the one that the children of Locust Lane walk on, and the adults to cut through the Scaviers field to get up to Rolling Mead. My husband and I are very interested in creating a permanent easement, so that it would not be a revocable license, but would be a permanent easement that would allow the children of Locust Lane, and actually the adults as well, to be able to get to Rolling Mead and to Little Brook, to the high school, to the middle school, and generally be able to avoid Nassau Street. So to the extent that a subdivision would support the possibility of creating a permanent easement, we'd like to support that. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Catherine Jones. I live at 7 Locust Lane, so a little further down the street from Grayson. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that, I think I'm too short. Is that better? Closer? Okay. Hi. So, I mean, as a resident of Locust Lane and the parent of one of the young children that use that easement, yes?
I'm going to ask, I'm not... Are you testifying truthfully or swear to...
Yes, I am testifying truthfully, yes. My
Uh,
name is Catherine Jones, Kathryn, Jones, Jones. I live at 7 Locust Lane, and I am the parent of one of the young children that crosses through that easement in order to go to Little Brook and to get to Rolling Mead. And we're very thankful to Grayson and to the Scavier family for allowing us to do that. I come here today with two concerns, and I'm speaking on behalf of other families with young children, one of whom was here earlier tonight with her 2 young boys but had to leave because it was getting a little bit late for them. Our concern first and foremost is with the nature of the license, in that the license is revocable, and our concern is that if the Scaviers are to subdivide the property and then sell that other half of the property where the easement is located, either I can see where the green is on that left-hand side of the property, and same with the red line on the far left-hand side of the property, is that the new owners of that side of the property, the subdivided lot, will then revoke the easement. And certainly I understand concerns if there's misbehaving children. However, the new owners can revoke it for any reason depending on the terms of the license agreement. So that's definitely our concern, and we support Grace and Barbara and her family in wanting to establish a permanent easement that go through there. And we had one additional concern that I wanted to raise with everyone tonight, and that's specifically for my neighbors also on Locust Lane who experienced some pretty significant flooding recently after there was a pretty big storm. And the concern becomes what happens if you build a house on that side of the lot, and what will it do to the water table and to the risk of flooding there. And we would prefer to see an independent engineer who would look at that and ensure that that wouldn't be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ralph Perry, and I live at 83 Random Road, and in the Canessa Park area.
And I'm going to ask you, sir, if you swear or affirm to testify truthfully.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to ask if you swear or affirm to testify truthfully.
Absolutely. I live on the Nassau Street side of Random Road, and there are 11 properties that belong to Canessa Park, and every property has approximately between 0.85 to 0.95 of an acre property. This property is 1 acre in a zoning which is a half an acre zoning. There are going to be builders lined up to buy this and then subdivide that property into 2 properties, and nothing can stop them because it's in a half an acre zoning. Why this is not 0.95 or 0.96 or 0.99 of an acre, I will let the committee think about that. It could have done and would have made any difference. That's number one. Number 2 comment is, if the people who want to subdivide need money, selling half of the property or subdividing is not the only way to do it. A reverse mortgage will do the same thing, will give them almost the same money that they can get here. As a matter of fact, I offered them to advise them how to get a reverse mortgage, how to do that, and help them at no charge, and simply to show them something that they can make a comparison between unearthing this whole thing and shaking up this whole business of subdivision in Canessa Park. The last comment I have is that we have been here for more than an hour. This committee, I presume, I don't know, I think everybody on this committee is a volunteer and is not getting paid for it. But there are people in this room who are getting paid to sit here and take notes and do things. And I really want to challenge this whole idea that the committee could listen to this and subdivide the property or pass it when the committee has absolutely no jurisdiction over the Canessa Park deed. This committee cannot change the Canessa Park deed. If the federal government passes a law, I can challenge it in a federal court. If the state of New Jersey passes a law, I challenge it in a state court. A deed restriction on property, which is signed by the owners on the same moment that they sign the mortgage in the bank or that they sign the deed that is being transferred, has the power just like a law. It is a law. It can only be changed either by the people who did it, agree to it, or by a court. A subdivision usually will go to court. Now, in this particular case, this committee is doing a lot of work for what? You are sitting here an hour, I am sitting here and waiting for an hour, and what? You pass the law, you say, okay, this is none of our business, we will allow this subdivision, and what happens then? We'll go to court, and this is going to drag in court for a couple of years, and all the work that you are doing and you did is for naught, is thus useless. And I think that somewhere the town of Princeton should look at these things and pass some kind of a regulation that if there is a deed restriction, especially in the real estate area, the people who want to change that have to change it first with the people who control the deed restriction, not come to this committee. Gee, terrific, you're going to allow the subdivision, and what then? We'll see all these gentlemen in court. It's just as simple as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll answer any question if anybody wants to ask me something. And my offer for a reverse mortgage school is still open. That's my business.
Hello, my name is Michael Libertazzo, and I swear to tell only the truth.
And I can't hear you. Could
And I swear only to tell the truth as well.
what, would you?
Libertazzo, Libertazzo. I live at 112 Rolling Mead, directly across the street, in the house that was quoted as doubling in size. Actually, what was renovated in my house was that there was a bedroom, a master bedroom, and a porch, and a bit of a small extension on the living room that was extended. Wasn't doubled in size. That's an interesting point about how it's misrepresented. My name is still on the list of approved signatures, even though months and months and months ago, I sent them a certified letter with the return dollar, and I submitted it to the committee the last time I was here, saying that I was coerced into signing it, that they had approached me several times, that they intimidated me with their anger, and I was in the middle of chemotherapy at the time, which I'm again starting next Friday. I know that there's several other neighbors that are on that list that feel the same way. For some reason, it's still being represented as approval, as signatures, which is not true. The financial hardship that's being represented, how many of you spend your entire summers on vacation on Long Island? The Scaveers do every summer. I don't. I work. So I don't understand the financial hardship. They've also tried to do this many, many times now over the 23 years that I've been here. So this has been long in the works, and it has been stated that originally the property was purchased so large so that this could be done at some point, and that was the original plan by Tatsi's father. Let's see if I have anything else. So I just feel like there's been a lot of coercion and deception in the way this has been represented, both to us neighbors and to what's being represented here in the court tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Greg Hughes, Hughes, and I promise to tell the truth. I live at 8 Random Road, and I'm fairly new to the community. I guess I've been there for about 8 years now. And to be honest, I didn't truly understand the deed restrictions when I first moved in. I knew about them. When I was approached about signing, my name appears on that list. When I was approached to sign those, the explanation that I was given did not meet the actual words on those deed restrictions, and I did sign those. And the understanding that I had was that the board was aware, that the community was aware, and that everybody in that group of 45 homeowners had received that document, and that was not the case. I was selected because I was new, and I was unaware. And when I did find out, I did sign another document and turned it over to the board. There's several people that have done that. And the other piece that is interesting, and it will probably come up when the time when we get to court time, that this was a contract, which we were paid $1 for. I did not receive that $1, I was offered the $1. And when we did not receive the $1, they made sure that they gave it to my small child, which I think goes to the efforts here to try to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Philip Caputa. K-A-P-U-T-A is the spelling of my last name. I'm a resident in Carnassa Park at 41 Little Brook Road, which is 3 or 4 properties down from the Scaviers. First, I just wanted to, again, thank the Scaviers for their kindness and generosity in allowing the children access to Rolling Mead and Little Brook School through their property. I think that that's a great sign of community and kindness on their part. You know what, I think sitting in the seat here, thinking about all the things that this board has been listening to tonight, you know what, I think one suggestion that I just wanted to put forth would be, given the discussion around the deed restrictions, there could be an option here where it would be better for the planning board to ask the applicant to resolve the deed restrictions first, and then come back to the planning board subsequent to that action. You know, action by the planning board would create a situation tonight where you could have a subdivision on the town map which does not exist under the applicable deed restrictions and sort of creates an inherent conflict there. So just one thought to consider. The only other thought I would put forth to consider is, you know, Harry's Brook lies directly behind this, this subdivision. As a former renter of a home on Roper Road, which is, again, probably 3 or 4 properties away from this, the amount of flooding to the neighborhood homes on Harry's Brook that would be aggravated by another house being subdivided and creating additional runoff. Being an owner of that home, the amount of times that we faced flooding issues was just way above expectations. So just another thing for the board to consider. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Bob Russell, and I live with my wife Ann at 88 Rolling Mead Street. I promise to tell the truth and to do it in under 3 minutes. 88 Rolling Mead Street, despite the fact it's about Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L-L. That is the last name, yes. Robert, first name. Despite the fact that there's 20 number differences between us and the Scaviers, that we actually own the property that's catty corner to this property. And I would just like to say that tonight we're choosing not to scorn or praise the application. We feel that the board can make their own decisions there. We have a very specific request. There are trees, there are one of the things we've always enjoyed about this piece of property is the open field and the trees that flank it on both sides. And we're asking specifically that if you can include in the conditions of approval the preservation of the trees that fall within the setback, between the setback line and the lot line on this piece of property. The R5 district only has a 15-foot setback. We feel that those trees are significant and beyond the regulations. I know there was some discussion about a tree protection plan, but we're asking that you actually specifically include the preservation of those trees within that 15 feet on both sides. That would preserve the trees and also preclude the installation of driveways immediately adjacent to the property line, which is permitted under the ordinance. That's all I got.
Could you show this, so the area in question on one of the slides, that where the app?
Yeah.
Well, either there, well, maybe Ms. Miak.
The distance between the lot line and the setback distances to be moved right in this area, preferably on both sides of the lot.
So the first 15 feet of tree line on those two lots?
Back to the microphone. 15 feet on both sides, the area that's within the setback line. These are also the areas that are designated on the drawings as possible, I don't know if you want to call them easement, Chris, but your travel paths.
Sorry, explain that to us. That's designated as the alternate passageway for the school children.
They're in those same areas, yes.
Okay.
Let's see, so that we could we put up I guess this map is up already?
Right.
Yes.
So the big trees, if they had to cut the bushes to let the kids walk through.
Yeah, I'm talking about the trees of size that come under the current ordinance.
Right. Save the larger trees, and that's why it was suggested that the path, wherever it is, meander around trees, not cut a straight path, cutting down trees that don't need to be cut down.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The ordinance would permit those trees to be cut if they were permitted, if they were applied for to be cut down, they would be cut down. We're simply asking that the conditions of approval require the preservation of those trees that are viable.
That's acceptable with the distinction that we made between the bushes and the trees to let the kids go through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if I can address the point that was just raised. May I do that?
Briefly, yes.
Without saying anything about whether a new home would ever be built here or a right-of-way for the people from Locust Lane would be put into place, if the property were to be subdivided and there were to be a new structure built, the Carnassa Park deed restrictions have side setbacks greater than the township. That would mean that Mr. Russell's problem disappears because he's asking for protection within that 15 feet. We have, I believe, 30-foot side setbacks, not from the property line, but from any right-of-way. So if there is a right-of-way put in, these new lots are going to have setback requirements separate and apart from any subdivision issue that are going to have to comply with our setback requirements, and you're going to have to come before the Carnassa Park Board to get approval for that. Thank you.
So setbacks are different from tree preservation. The setback lines, both municipal and private, have to do with whether the structure can encroach into that side area. The question Mr. Russell asked about was, could the trees be preserved? So they're really two different concepts. And it's acknowledged that the new home construction in Carnassa Park requires Housing Board approval. So there would be independent processes that would take place.
The applicant is willing to preserve the trees that Mr. Russell requested?
Yes.
My name is William O'Shaughnessy. I live on Littlebrook Road, right behind Littlebrook School. We're at the corner of Roper and Littlebrook.
Okay. Mr. O'Shaughnessy, you will testify truthfully to the extent you're testifying?
Absolutely truthful, yes. My wife Mary, among the supermajority which consented to this application. Why did we consent? Because the grant of the application will not have any effect whatsoever on our property or on the overall neighborhood of Carnassa Park. And I've yet to hear anyone identify in any way where either their property or the neighborhood scheme would be affected adversely. And let me just put to rest any concerns that you might have about were representations made to us? Was our consent fraudulently induced in some way? Nothing was said along those lines. No promises, no representations of any kind. We made our own judgment, and we expect that all these other adults did too. And on one thing, I think we can be absolutely, I can say with total clarity, is that we're all agreed this board does not have jurisdiction over private deed restrictions. Indeed, Mr. Zetterberg hand-delivered to me a letter yesterday, and I presume he delivered similar copies to the other members of the association, saying the planning board specifically does not take private deed restrictions into account in their decision-making. And yet, they lamented the time that they've taken up tonight when they knew all along that this was not a matter within your jurisdiction. And it's important to appreciate, too, I think we've all gotten more deeply into this issue of the deed restrictions than anyone wanted to or needed to. But the deed itself provides a mechanism for modification, for relief of these deed restrictions, of which no subdivisions is one, and that is upon the obtaining of 2/3 of the consent of the membership. Now, if there's going to be some question as to the enforceability of those consents, that clearly is a matter for a court in Trenton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's probably about it for participation. Anyone feeling left out? Okay, let me close the public portion of this. And yes, Ms. Trott.
I have a specific question of Mr. Porter, if I may. I am not aware of the rules and regulations of Canessa Park Homeowners Association. I suspect that we would not be, but isn't our responsibility to determine whether or not this particular application meets or satisfies the requirements that's been set by Princeton when it pertains to subdivision? That is our only responsibility here. Is that true?
Yes.
Thank you.
Which are?
Does it comply with the zoning?
I mean, does it advance the zoning goals of the neighborhood, and is it?
Does it meet the standards? Issues of, I mean, we have heard a lot of things that, in my judgment, are not relevant tonight. We have a staff here. Mr. Bridger is the zoning officer. We have a representative from the engineering department, and Mr. Solo from the planning department. All of our reports are that this complies with all of the municipal standards for subdivision. And that's our chore, that's our goal. We're not looking at what's good for the neighborhood, whether the Scaviers have a financial problem or not. That's not our issue. They can spend the summer in Long Island, they can go wherever they want. They don't need to agree to have a reverse mortgage. Those financial issues are totally irrelevant, and to the extent that they were brought up, they're irrelevant. In my judgment, all of the testimony about the applicant, the release that the applicant has, that's also irrelevant. Just by hearing what you've heard tonight, this board is not equipped to determine whether a signature on that petition, which has been purported to be withdrawn, Mr. Libertazzo's testimony, we're just not prepared to decide whether that's a valid issue or not. Other issues of whether someone misunderstood or was prevailed upon or felt prevailed upon, that's just not an issue we can decide or equipped to decide. That's what courts are for, to decide contested issues. We talk about lawsuits. In my judgment, if we were to deny this application because of the Carnassa Park restrictions, we'd be very vulnerable to a lawsuit. That's not our role. The law is clear. Of course, you understand that the neighborhood has its views and it has its mechanism for protecting those and for enforcing those. But the issue, I think it was said, whether it's we have no reason to believe the restrictions are invalid. But if the applicant felt that they were not valid, that's something the applicant could contest in court, just as the neighbors could withdraw or purport to withdraw their consents. So in terms of what the question was, what are we doing here? What we're doing here is we're deciding whether this proposed application meets the standards that were enacted by Princeton. And our staff tells us they meet or exceed, these lots meet or exceed the requirements.
Alan, I think one thing that we can do is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is discuss a more permanent arrangement for the path that the school children use to get to Littlebrook School. We heard from several neighbors who'd like a more permanent arrangement than just the letter of agreement or memorandum of understanding. That's within our purview to ask that be a condition for approval, is it?
While Alan's thinking.
Well, I'm not thinking, I'm just thinking of how to respond. I think
you can just say yes or no.
No. Let's see whether, this is really, the fact that there's even a license agreement is the voluntary action of the landowner. So the landowner has taken it to one point. The question I guess we would put to the applicant is the applicant willing to consider a permanent location?
10 seconds.
And to make that rather than a revocable license.
But could you answer the question?
Yeah, you want me to answer whether we, as a matter of law, have the power to require a private landowner to impose a permanent easement on the property for the benefit of others when it's not generated by the subdivision? No.
So
we certainly can request it.
They volunteered to work with the town in 2010, and in discussions with Reverend Scavere and Mrs. Scavere just now, they're prepared to make it a permanent easement, as my friend Grayson Barber would like to do on her property, so that there would be a permanent easement. I think I'd like for it to be characterized as this meandering location, that green line, red line, the location to be determined with the staff to make sure that it's acceptable to the person who builds a house on the new lot as well. But there's a willingness to make it permanent.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. I had another question about the covenant, and I understand that is supposed to be irrelevant to our decision, And my question is the converse true? So is any action by the board irrelevant to when a court, if it sounds like that's where this is headed, in terms of how a court interprets the covenant, our action will be irrelevant to that decision?
Definitely, and we can put in the resolution of approval, if there is one, that this shall have no binding or should have no effect on any court decision relating to the private restrictions.
The applicant quite agrees, and I put back up Mr. Cox, who says the grant of the variance in no way affects the validity of the covenant, nor the covenant the validity of the grant. So according to the expert that we all look to in New Jersey,
Mr. Cox?
we would agree that we don't think there's any relationship between the two.
Ms. Ullman?
Yeah, I wondered why the subdivision committee had referred this to the whole board and not made the decision, not having been at the meeting. I looked at the conformance with zoning, and it looked fine. I think I now understand a bit more about the psychology of all of us, and we're all members of the community, and we're always greatly influenced by how neighbors feel about a property. And I've never been to a subdivision meeting here or anyplace else where the neighbors said terrific. I mean, it's not going to happen. But and that's why I asked the question at the beginning, I mean, let's take the deed restrictions off the table. It's just not part of what we're talking about. I do think that in every way, legally, the zoning, which is our council's determination, allows this to happen in terms of all of the criteria that the two properties would involve. And I can't, other than the path, which has become a tradition, and I think I can well understand the usefulness of being able to go through it. I cannot see why we would not find this consistent with our municipal zoning.
David?
Just a minor comment in response to one of the public comments, the concern that the 1 acre lot would be re-subdividable by a developer in the future. The fact is that there's a 100-foot lot width requirement in this zone. The 1 acre lot is only 187 feet wide, so they would need a variance, which I'm quite sure would be denied if a developer were to try to subdivide that 1 acre lot.
Thank you.
They'd also need the approval from the Carnassic Park Housing Board.
And lots of time to do all of it. Yes, Ms. Carmona?
Well, so I'm going to ask a question that I get asked all the time, and that's, what you've essentially said is we have zero ability to say no legally to this application.
On the record presented, that's correct.
So why do we have this hearing? This is what everyone asks me all the time, and I kind of want to know.
Actually, this is a sequence of hearings. It went to subdivision, and subdivision has to be unanimous, and it was not.
But why did it go to the subdivision committee?
Because there is a process under the land use law for subdivisions to get public approval, not just staff approval.
But is there would there be any legal way for the subdivision committee to say no?
No, and so that's why we have a minor subdivision committee meeting, committee to screen the applications before they come here when the board has no ability to say no. But it requires a certain vote, and it didn't receive that vote, so it did come here.
I'll answer for you.
Well, I also have, I'm not finished. Sorry.
But, I mean, the subdivision committee felt that that there should be a public airing of the things you heard tonight, and that's what
There were, as the person who voted no at the subcommittee, at the subdivision committee, I would say my concerns were twofold. One was about the path, and one was about the noticing for the subdivision committee meeting itself. There were neighbors who claimed and were concerned that it wasn't noticed properly, that the meeting itself wasn't noticed properly, and that's why I voted against, because I felt like the neighbors deserved a chance to come before some committee properly noticed or some board and have their say. So if you want to throw me under the bus for the one who's keeping us here until 10 after 11.
No, that's not my intent
This is
at
the
all.
reason why, because I felt that everyone in the neighborhood had the right to be heard, and not just a small group of neighbors at a meeting at 10:30 in the morning on a weekday.
But, I mean, the reason that I'm asking this is because I feel like while we're the planning board, we're also community members, and we're hearing from this whole community that the community has made covenants amongst themselves, which to me seem very important, and I feel uncomfortable approving this and helping kind of fracture this neighborhood. I mean, I wonder if we could let the covenant issue resolve itself and then come back.
I just can't buy that. I don't think that is our job. I mean, as council people, you probably are more influenced by the emotions of a thing like this. But we just have a simple job here tonight, and that's to decide whether the zoning that you as council members have approved and could change if you don't like it, is being met by this application. That's a very simple thing, and it has nothing to do with who you like, who you don't like, and it simply is a matter of interpreting our own ordinances. And I do think that we have given the neighbors full opportunity to talk about something that we have no responsibility for. They know that, they heard that, and they wanted to be heard, and they were heard. But we still have an obligation to do what we're here for, which is to decide a project on the basis of the law. And so I am ready to move for the approval of this minor subdivision, along with the various conditions or requirements that have been put in, the idea that the path, we all have a strong feeling that it should be made permanent, but we have to wait, and I do think you have DEP issues and others, but that's would be a high consideration of mine too. About the trees, I don't know. I think we have a very rigorous tree ordinance now that ought to be relevant.
But they agreed to protect the trees in the side yard setback. So
Yeah, so I think that basically, I'm ready to make that motion.
Well, but I wanted to know if it was an option. I mean, would that be a legal option for us to base our approval on the
the
covenants?
deadline for action is tomorrow, Jenny.
Pardon?
The deadline for action by this board is tomorrow,
Yeah.
10/7/16.
May I?
I'm asking Alan.
May I second that
sorry,
motion
we have a
so we can now
a second
discuss
to
it? I second.
I just want to clarify what's in, can we also have some language in there that reiterate just on the record that we acknowledge that there's a dispute over the covenant and that our decision is separate from that? Just, I mean, it was in our documentation too, but if we can have some language that says that, I think that would help address
Sure.
those of
I
us who
said
feel
before, we
uncomfortable.
certainly can put in an approval resolution that this approval has no effect on the private restriction.
Okay.
And in terms of the conditions, there are, in addition to those in the report, there's the condition that the applicant will work with staff to locate a permanent location, or a location for a permanent easement for the pathway back for Locust, to the benefit of the Locust people, Locust Lane people, and that the trees, and I'll get the details on this, I guess within the 15-foot setback area will be preserved.
But could we put a condition that the covenant issue be resolved as a condition?
No. I mean, that's implicit, because their approval will be dependent on that issue being resolved if the Carnassa Housing Board feels that this is in violation and seeks to challenge the applicant, however that, whether it's the applicant who brings that action or the housing board, that issue, if it's in dispute, has a means of being, a place to be resolved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Would you call the roll then, please?
Ms. Capizoli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Krummuller?
Yes.
Mayor Limpert?
Yes.
Mrs. Trotman?
Yes.
Mrs. Ullman?
Yes?
Mrs. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Could I have a motion for adjournment now?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.